Greetings and salutations. This is Abdelhadi with The Bitter Truth, where we may not have all the answers, but we have an awful lot of questions. You can also support the show by visiting thebittertruth.info. And there you can hit the Patreon link if you so desire, buy some fabulous swag to make your life better. We got t-shirts and all kinds of fun things to have fun in your life. I'm excited. My guest today, friend of the show, he's been on before, pro-Palestinian activist, author, and he's literally been all over the world. He's written 2 books, Injustice, which is the story of the Holy Land Foundation 5, which if you don't know that story, I highly recommend picking up the book. And his first book, The General's Son, which was a story of how he came about to doing what he's doing now, sort of the awakening of a human being. Miko Peled, how are you, man?
Great. Good to be with you again. Thanks.
Thanks, man. Thanks. And so you just got back from there. So what, do tell, what happened when you were there and what's been going on?
Well, what's going on is nothing really new. I mean, what's going on is this massive war machine called Israel, just leaving no stone unturned, demolishing thousands of homes, leaving people homeless, bombing in Gaza, denying people water, Palestinians, that is, of course.
Right.
Demolishing only Palestinian homes too, but of course, just to make it clear. I met with some pretty interesting people in different parts of Palestine. Did a bunch of interviews for my podcast, my Patreon, and it's been it's fascinating, because it's hard not to get depressed. But then you talk to Palestinians on the ground, you see the activists, you see how hard everybody's working, and then you get charged up just by seeing their optimism. I don't know if optimism is the word, but they're like their ability to just keep fighting and keep going and keep raising these great kids and stuff like that. So I mean, that's really where the hope and the optimism comes from, because the situation is so severe. I mean, Jerusalem, the city of Lid, which is right between Jerusalem and Jaffa, Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, ancient Palestinian city with terrible stuff going on there. The southern part of the country, the Nakab. I mean, everywhere you go, there's horrible things are happening to Palestinians. And they're holding on, they're holding on to dear life, and they are just doing their thing. And that's how I am able to keep going. Otherwise, I'd be, hiding under the bed or something, because it's so depressing.
Well, yeah. And then this last spring, wasn't it the first time that Palestinians in Israel, Palestinian citizens of Israel, wasn't this the first time that they had a massive protest when all that stuff was happening in Gaza and the West Bank?
Well, exactly. In May, I was there in May. It was a massive uprising, and that's the reason for a lot of the Palestinians feeling hopeful, even though the situation is dire. But there was this unified stance, this unified uprising for the first time. And it was unified throughout all of Palestine, the entire country. Yeah, it's the first time, I would say, since 1948 that there was a that kind of an uprising where there was one Palestine, one Palestinian people. They broke down all the artificial barriers that Israel created between West Bank, Gaza, citizens of Israel, all different barriers that Israel created between Palestinians were all tossed away. And Palestinians stood, and you saw Palestinian flags everywhere. And you also saw a crackdown. They arrested thousands of Palestinian citizens of Israel.
Right.
They brought down, I don't know how many hundreds of actual indictments. They threw friends of mine, citizens of Israel, Palestinian citizens of Israel, I'm not talking about the West Bank, into the torture chambers of the Shabak, the Israeli secret police, beatings and interrogations and stuff like that. And what you see is it's a whole new generation. In other words, I know these guys' dads. Their dads are about my age, or right around my generation, I want to say.
Sure.
Kind of born in the 60s. These guys are in their late teens, early 20s, and now they're the ones being arrested. They're the ones who are experiencing this torture. They're the ones who are standing up and fighting. And so on the one hand, you go, wow, there's this new sense of resistance. On the other hand, you go, how long, how much longer, how many more kids are going to have to be tortured? How many more kids are going to be shot and killed? And who's out there to protect them?
Right.
Who's out there to protect them? If a friend of mine's son is held for 50 days and tortured 20 hours a day for over 50 days, in a dungeon, which is, by the way, right in the center of West Jerusalem, where all the bars and restaurants are. I mean, it's horrifying. Who's there to stand up and say, no, you can't do that? If that kid gets killed, who's there to take responsibility? And the answer is nobody.
Nobody.
There's nobody protecting them. There's no recourse. There's nowhere for Palestinians to go.
Well, let me ask you something. So within Israel, did the Israelis, and obviously with the arrests and the tortures and things like that, that's punishment in and of itself. But did they mow down Palestinian homes in Israel like they do in West Bank?
By the thousands, by the thousands. There are today, not including the Nakab, which is the entire southern half of Palestine, because that's run by its own. Israel has its own agency that deals with the Palestinian Bedouins. So not including that, not including Jerusalem, and not including the West Bank or Gaza, 40,000 demolition orders on the books today.
Oh my!
Over 40, about 43,000 demolition orders for homes today.
In Israel, not the West Bank.
Israeli said, Palestinian citizens of Israel.
Wow.
Now the Nakab, which is the entire almost 60% southern part of the country, they've been demolishing over 2,000 homes per year. Jerusalem has something like, I believe, 20,000 demolition orders on the books today. You'd be hard pressed to find a Palestinian. Now, what happens is, Palestinians can't build legally because they're never given a permit.
Right.
When cities and I was in the city of Lid, which very few people have ever heard of for some reason, but it's one of the oldest cities in Palestine. The famous, St. George is from Lid. Who's a Palestinian from Lid, the guy who slayed the dragon.
Oh, I know he's Palestinian.
He's Palestinian from Lid. He's buried in Lid. This is the Church of St. George is in Lid.
Didn't know that. Okay.
So this is a city. This is a city where it's called what's called a mixed city. God knows how many home demolitions and the home demolitions. So I met there with a member of the city council, a Palestinian member of the city council, this brilliant young lady. Called Abdelhadi, and she gave me a tour, and we talked about the situation in the city and so forth. It is beyond belief, how now when they have like the 5-year plan, the 30-year plan, the 20-year plan for a city, in terms of development, they plan only for the growth of the Jewish population.
Right.
And these are cities where the Palestinians who live are citizens of Israel, like Lid, for example. So there's no taking into consideration the growth of the Palestinian community. So they never get permits to build. They never get space to build. Their schools are never improved. And so what are people going to do? You have to have a home for people. People get married, people have children, they need a home. And the thing is this, a lot of people build illegally. I know Israeli Jews who build illegally. They put an addition, they close a balcony, they add a little bit here and there.
Sure.
Nobody bothers to get a lot of people don't bother to get a permit. They'll do it. If they get caught, then they get a fine, then they go to court, then they get a stay. But nobody ever Israeli Jews never get anything demolished.
Right.
You're not going to see the Israeli police and military coming in, closing down an Israeli Jewish street and demolishing a home. It happens to Palestinians all the time. I was at a home of a Palestinian in the town of Lakia, which is a small town in the south of the Nakab. His home was demolished 4 times.
Jesus Christ.
4 different times, 4 different homes that he's built for himself and his family.
Right.
Because they never get permits. So there's no such thing as legal construction for Palestinians. Anything Palestinians can do is immediately construed as illegal. And then it's a tool, it's a political tool. The secret police come and they want informants. They start to negotiate. They do all kinds of dirty things that occupation forces do.
Right.
And have always done, to blackmail populations that are in need. But it's happening all over the place, all over the entire country. There is no difference.
And it's still illegal for not even just Palestinians, but Arabs of any stripe to buy property in Israel, correct?
Yeah, you can't buy property. You can't even lease property. 97%, according to the laws of not the state of Israel, but the JNF, which supposedly is the owner of the land it's kind of like the caretaker of the land of Israel for the Jewish people. That's really kind of what the JNF is about. So 97% of the country is not allowed to be leased or sold to non-Jews.
Yeah. Okay.
Cannot be sold or leased to any non-Jews. But of course, the non-Jews they're worried about are, of course, the Palestinians who own the land, and have owned the land for thousands of years.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, about 5 years ago, there was a developer. I remember reading, and I think it was New York Times. It was an Israeli developer who got busted because he was selling property to expats, Palestinian expats, and under these umbrella corporations or whatever. I think he got like 5 years in jail because you're not supposed to do that or whatever. And whether he did it because he thought it was right or whether he did it because he thought it'd be a quick buck and whatever. But yeah, he got nailed for that, and so it's still illegal, and people don't know that. When you tell them,
no, it's illegal. It's completely illegal. It's completely illegal again by this crazy reality, which says that the land of Israel not belongs to the citizen of Israel, but belongs to the Jewish people, most of whom live outside of Israel.
Right. Well, see, and okay,
it's unbelievable.
Well, when you were there last, I mean, and this last bit of time you were there, and what I'm seeing, or what I saw during the April, May, like people in the world were protesting, and I hadn't seen anything like that since the late 80s, right? Yeah. But I was kind of like, wait till they say ceasefire. As soon as they say the magic word ceasefire, everyone like kind of goes back to sleep, and they think it's all over, and it's all like that they're not still murdering Gazans, and they're still not mowing down homes in West Bank. And I knew that those protests were going to have a punishment to it, because there's no way you protest in Israel and not get nailed. But so what are you seeing worldwide in terms of a continued reaction to what happened this last spring?
Well, it's like you said, everybody went back to sleep. Yeah. And that's exactly the problem. So, you're right. After the May uprising, particularly after the massive assault against Gaza, where over 200 people were murdered by Israel, slaughtered by Israeli jets, there were massive protests. Some of the biggest protests we've seen, I don't know, ever, or at least, like you said, in a very long time. But my point is this, it's great that people come out and protest, but the 200 people that were killed are already dead.
Right.
That's not going to do them any good. What we need to do is we need to continue the pressure. We need to prevent the next attack.
Right.
And the next attack is the next day. I mean, this whole ceasefire is a joke. I mean, Israel's attacking and killing people, Palestinians everywhere all the time. Palestinians in Gaza are still they're dying from the wounds of the attacks from years ago, because there's no access to medical care. A child in Gaza with a curable cancer will die, even though a child across the wall on the other side in an Israeli settlement with the exact same disease will live, because they have access. They decide who gets access to medical care.
Right.
So we need to be out there to defend the Palestinians who are alive today, not to protest the ones who were killed yesterday.
Right.
It's too late for them. We need to do something to prevent the next one. We need to do something to prevent Israel from next attack. Thursday, the Israeli Prime Minister is coming to Washington, D.C. I want to know why there are not 1 million people in the streets protesting his presence here. What is the head of this murderous, racist state visiting Washington, D.C.? What is the American administration doing hosting a man like that instead of arresting him immediately and throwing him in jail for war crimes? What is it about this country that doesn't understand, the elected officials of this country who don't understand that being a Zionist is a crime, that there should be zero tolerance to Zionism and to the state of Israel? What needs to happen for them to understand? How many more kids need to die? How many Palestinians need to be tortured in prison? What else does Israel need to do before we get this? So I'm saying Palestinians have given us a gift. There's a call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Demand sanctions. Right. Demand our elected officials endorse the call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Demand that every elected official from school board up stand up and say, I am not a Zionist. I will support BDS, or else they won't get elected. That's the reality we have to be here now. Imagine somebody standing up and saying, I hate black people. I'm a white supremacist. Vote for me. That's exactly what these people are saying when they say I'm a Zionist. Right. That's got to end. That has to end.
Well, shouldn't we, and I don't know all of the particulars of doing this, but AIPAC is not an American lobbying firm, is it? Or a lobbying group, is it? Is an AIPAC?
Well, it's AIPAC and J Street are two lobby groups that lobby for the state of Israel. They're Zionist organizations that lobby for Israel.
Okay.
And why is it okay to lobby for a racist, violent state that commits war crimes on a regular basis? A state that has been recognized by Human Rights Watch, which is by no means an anti-Israeli organization,
right?
As an apartheid regime. From the river to the sea. In other words, the entire country has been designated as an apartheid regime.
Right.
So what you know what I mean? What are we doing? What is America doing supporting that kind of a country? Why is it okay to lobby for that sort of thing here in the United States, and not just lobby big time? We're talking about lots of money,
right?
And we've got to talk about lots of politicians in their pocket.
Well, see, and that's the crux of it. You know, sometimes I'll tell my friends, I'm like, listen, AIPAC, you bitch about the NRA. AIPAC has everybody. You know, the NRA just has Republicans. The AIPAC has everybody, and it's easy to play dumb. It's easy to play dumb when you're getting that field trip and the cash. You know, because they don't take Nancy Pelosi to the West Bank. They take Nancy Pelosi to fucking Tel Aviv.
Yeah, and then they show her kind of a nice Arab who says that everything's great. But I mean, it starts. Never forget Nancy Pelosi. It starts with people who run for school board.
Sure.
People who start for school board and city council and mayors. It starts, the Zionists realized, the Zionist lobby, even before AIPAC, realized that in America, all politics is local. They start local. They go to school boards and they want to make sure that they only approve curriculum that is approved by the Zionists. Always shows Israel in a good light. It doesn't say the word occupation. It doesn't say the word apartheid.
Right.
It doesn't describe the violence perpetrated against Palestinians. It doesn't talk about the catastrophe and the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. That's what the school boards do. Then you go on to city councils and they get invited to the junkets. And then you go on to state legislatures and so on and so on. This is where they start. And every single voter in America needs to understand that they have to demand all their elected officials take a pledge. They will not be Zionists. They will not support Israel. They will not support the Zionists, or else it's never going to end. Or else the killing of Palestinians, the destruction of Palestine, the destruction for Jerusalem. I talked to a guy who works at Al-Aqsa, the official agency that takes care of Al-Aqsa as a holy place for the Muslims.
Yeah.
I mean, the attacks of settlers. If Al-Aqsa gets burnt down tomorrow, if the Golden Dome gets destroyed tomorrow. And these are Muslim structures that have been there for over 1,500 years.
That's right.
They're not only religiously important, they're culturally, they're architecturally, they're historically incredibly significant, monuments. Besides, they're gorgeous. If they get burned down tomorrow by Israeli settlers, it's not because there was no warning. It's because people are not paying attention to the warning. It's because people are letting Israel get away with it.
And
because
okay.
Now, I was going to say there are tens of thousands of Israelis who go on these tours of Al-Aqsa as a provocation. And they're armed and they are surrounded by armed police. I took one of those tours when I was there in May. You cannot believe what goes on there. You cannot believe the provocation, the armed patrol that kind of goes along with this tour. I mean, it's horrifying. Tens of thousands of Israelis that go on these tours to support the provocation and to kind of pray for the destruction of these glorious monuments. Never mind if you're a Muslim or not. How could you possibly want the most these iconic symbols of Jerusalem, of Palestine, of Islam, things that have been so significant to so many people for so long be destroyed? What kind of a sick human being do you have to be, a sick society, a sick government, to want to destroy stuff like that?
Well, and that when I was there, and that's how much things have changed, because when I was there in '88, the Israeli army would guard outside of Al-Aqsa, so settlers could not go and do stupid shit, right?
So, well, they still do, but then they allow these tours, organized tours, several times a day to go as supposedly just for people, visiting hours.
Right.
But you can't just go as a visitor. You have to go with this tour that's organized by the settlers.
Yeah.
And is heavily armed. So that's what they do. But that's kind of, so they do want to pretend as like they're trying to protect the Palestinians and the Muslims, but they're really not. They're allowing them to come in through the back door.
Right. Well, and that's again where it's changed. I mean, I don't know too many. Well, in the United States, I do. In the United States, I know plenty of Israelis, especially in LA, American Jews, who think that this is an abomination and this is terrible. It's happening to Palestinians, blah, 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 blah. Right. But then I don't really see it go much past that. And I'm not going to say the right wing, but it's almost like it's an oxymoron, but to say like the liberal Zionists, they want to sort of assuage their own guilt by saying, yeah, well, I still believe in a 2-state solution. No, you don't. That's dead. That's gone. But let me ask you something that you could probably answer this better than anybody. And I'm looking at it as for right now, right? Can there be Palestinian rights in Israel? I mean, immediately, not this Oslo shit, like a real Palestinian rights. Get rid of the blue and green ID cards, get rid of the segregated utilities, shutting off their water. I mean, like tomorrow, can there be that at least right now? Stop the murder, stop the bullshit without a Palestine, or does there have to be a Palestine?
Well, there has to be a collapse of the state of Israel, of the Zionist regime. It's like it's like in South Africa, you couldn't have rights for blacks within the apartheid regime. You can't have rights for Palestinians within the Zionist regime. It's you can't. The two forces that
so it's not reformable. In other words.
No, of course not. You can't reform racism. Racism is racist. It's a racist ideology that relies on violence. There's no place to reform it. You have to get rid of it, and you have to get rid of it fast. So within the state of Israel, you couldn't have Palestinian rights. But what we need to do is we need to demand sanctions, heavy sanctions. We need to demand boycotts to collapse not only the state of the state of Israel, but to in the Olympics there were these two judo competitors that refused to compete with Israelis. One was Algerian, one was from Sudan. Right. Now, Israel shouldn't be allowed to compete in the Olympics anyway because it's a criminal rogue state. It should not be allowed to compete. It should not be allowed into the Olympics or the World Cup or any of these major world events. But these two guys put everything on the line. Sure. And you know what it's like. You can imagine what it's like to get to the Olympics, how hard you have to work to get to the Olympics, and then to get to the mat and say, no, my principles are more important. I will stand with the Palestinian people's rights. I will not give legitimacy to the state of Israel by doing this. I mean, it's enormous sacrifice. That's huge. What needs to happen. Every athlete needs to say no to competing with the state of Israel. And these guys, they were sent home. They were, sanctioned and all that. They will be remembered as the heroes of the 2021 Olympics. Right.
It's going to be like 1968, with now I'm spacing on their names. The two guys that, put a black glove on on the podium, and they got a lot of shit for it when they got home. But their medals got stripped.
And Colin Kaepernick. I mean, it's the same thing. You either stand and or you don't stand. And when you're in that place where the world is looking at you and you take a stance, people are now going, "Oh my God, wow!" Yeah. Even if they don't agree with you, it starts a conversation, and that's heroism, and that's exactly what you need to do. I was really proud because I did martial arts my whole life, and these guys were martial artists, and they were exemplary because they showed martial arts principle always comes first. Not beating the other guy's brains out, but standing for principle. That's how you win. Right. And they defeated those two Israeli competitors without even stepping on the mat.
That's right.
So that's the only thing that's going to stop it. If we believe in justice, in humanity, in equality, in rights for Palestinians, if you want to see this magnificent country survive and thrive, if you want to see these amazing monuments in Jerusalem stay intact and be there for future generations, we have to step up. We have to stand up against Israel. All of us.
But it's almost a conditioning. Like I got some friends, lean a little bit right. I remember about 2 years ago, I went to my friend's house watching football, and fucking commercial for Wonder Woman came on. So they're Christians and they go to church. So she was like, "Oh my God, it's so amazing because she doesn't look Israeli." And right away I go, "And what the fuck does an Israeli look like?" A bunch of Ashkenazi white, like a bunch of white Ashkenazi.
What the hell does that even mean?
Yeah, like what does that even mean? Like Ethiopian Jews are black, it's like she's a white Ashkenazi, Romanian, Ukraine, whatever the fuck she is. It's like it's a big mix of imported colonialists, And
Of
then
course it is.
my buddy was like, "Oh, well, let's not go down that road. We're gonna watch football." I'm like, "Okay, well then don't bring up that shit and like trying to like tacitly, tell me that you approve of this shit going on because it's wrong." And to get that chick to play Cleopatra is a fucking joke. I'm not, that's a whole other show. But
Of course.
but that's the thing though is it's almost a conditioning. Like slowly but surely, like I go to the grocery store. I live here in Austin, Texas, and we have a chain of grocery stores here called HEB, and they usually do a lot of good work. But I'll go there and I'll see this shit that they make, and they call it Israeli couscous, right? And I'm going, fuck you. It's not Israeli. It's Arab. Yeah. It's Palestinian. It's like in America we don't call it American foo young. It's egg foo young. It's Chinese food. It's egg foo young, right? We don't say California enchiladas or calaladas. We say enchiladas, right? Here's an entire colonial experiment that has just done nothing but try to appropriate an entire culture. And like I see them some magazines sometimes wearing the same wedding dress stuff that my cousins would wear, my mom would wear.
So right? They wear thobe. They made that into an Israeli thing.
Yeah, and I'm going, fuck you. Like, since when? I mean, it's just that's the kind of thing that just angers me. It's like, dude, you guys are European colonial settlers. Period. That's it. You're not part of the thing. I remember about 25 years ago, I got in a fight with this guy, not a fist fight, but I went to Amoeba Records to get some records. And there was this some Mediterranean food. I'm like, oh, cool. I need a falafel. Walk into the store. The guy was Israeli, right? He sees my debit card and he goes, oh, Abdelhadi, yeah, we're cousins. And I go, well, if you want to get like into Abraham and all that shit, I guess we are. But whatever. You're selling falafel. It's nice that you can make. And we had this debate back and forth. I go, it's not your food. We invented it. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You didn't invent it. You didn't invent hummus. You didn't you didn't invent any of it. You just charged right in 1948, and now you think you own the whole thing, and you don't.
And it goes even beyond that, because in 1948, Israel did two things. Number one, what Palestinians say, they stole Palestine fully furnished. Right. They say in Arabic. Palestine was a thriving economy. It was a thriving country, big cities, industries, newspapers, magazines, theaters, political movements. Everything, schools, universities. It was a thriving country with thriving cities for centuries. The Zionists came and stole everything from the produce that was in the fields, the oranges that were on the trees, the agriculture equipment that was being used, the money that was in people's banks, the spaces that were built, the buildings that were built. Everything. They stole everything. That's how they were able to, and there's an estimate of how many billions and billions of dollars the state of Israel owes Palestinians. And I'm not talking about personal homes and personal property. I'm talking about public, the spaces and the property and the things that belonged to people in general, to the public.
Right.
Billions and billions of dollars. They stole everything. And that's why they were able to start to move in and become a functioning state right away. They stole everything, and they took over and kind of took over, I suppose, the culture, the food, the culture, the kafia, the hummus, I remember as a kid going home from school, I'm talking about West Jerusalem. I never, there were no Palestinians there because West Jerusalem, the ethnic cleansing was complete. No Palestinians were left. So when I grew up in West Jerusalem, there were no Palestinians, but every other shop was a falafel shop,
right,
run by Jews who came from Arab countries and knew how to make, Arabic food. They kind of, they decided that they were going to use all of these things, and when they want to show Jerusalem, they show Al-Aqsa, they show the Golden Dome.
Right.
When they want, they use Palestine, the beauty of Palestine, some of the history of Palestine, and they say it's ours. And now it's really funny because when you go around the country, everywhere you go, there are destroyed homes, destroyed villages, destroyed towns, and a lot of them have become public parks. And so you see these ruins, and they say that these were Roman ruins. Okay, so your whole life you grow up thinking these are Roman ruins. Then then at some point you realize there was a Nakba, and these were all Palestinian towns and villages. And now, recently, a few weeks ago, Haaretz came out with this article that a researcher just revealed that much of these ruins are actually not Roman ruins or Greek ruins or Byzantine. These are actually Palestinian homes, Palestinian villages that were destroyed in 1948.
Wow.
And you go, wow, what a revelation. They are so smart. Finally now, after 75 years, the Palestinians have been saying this. Haaretz, which is considered, a very liberal newspaper, comes out with a story that this is true. Of course it is. The entire country you walk on graves. The entire country you walk. It's a little bit like walking around Central Europe in towns that used to be heavily Jewish, and now they've all been murdered. They're all killed by the Nazis. And you walk on destroyed Jewish towns, and you walk on destroyed on the ashes and the bodies of dead Jews. It's almost the same thing. You walk around Tel Aviv. You walk around. You're in the beach. You're walking through Palestinian towns that were destroyed. You're walking through neighborhoods that were destroyed. You're walking through massacres and mass graves everywhere.
See, and
people need to get the sink into their heads.
Yeah, see, and kind of we got a few minutes here, but in a real quick interest of transparency, you're not just some run of the mill Israeli guy. You got history. You come from, your grandfather signed the Declaration. He's one of the signers, right? Your father was a general. In the 6 Day War. You're as dyed in the wool with this stuff as anybody, right?
Yeah, you could not possibly have a more Zionist education, a more Zionist upbringing, a more Zionist family that I grew up in.
Right.
Family gatherings, we would have the president of the state of Israel, government ministers, my father, the general. That was the milieu. That was the people that came over to dinner. That was the people that we saw at weddings and family gatherings.
Right.
And you listen to them talk. And these were all these old, very, very important, some older, some younger, but really important people who were either retired important people or currently important people.
Sure.
Who ran the country, who were major Zionists, of course. And that is how I know what I know. That is why I say we must stop it. That's why I say we must bring it down, because it's a violent, racist ideology that has been spreading lies about the history of Palestine and has been causing nothing but suffering, endless, useless, constant suffering to innocent people, millions of innocent people.
Sure, and it just doesn't seem to be ceasing. And the challenge we have here, people, they love to go to sleep. I just recorded a show last night with somebody, and we were talking about Joe Biden. I pulled up his first 100 days, which were a craptastic, spectacular failure. And, she was kind of surprised that, it was that bad. And I'm going, no, I've been keeping track of this shit because I knew he was going to be blue Trump. And I knew that as soon as he came in, Americans would go right back to bed. And this Afghanistan thing shocked them. Oh my God, I can't believe, really? It's been Vietnam for 20 years. You didn't know? You really didn't know?
Exactly. Of course.
But it's a uniquely American proposition. It really is. They love to go to sleep, and they just want to, I know more Americans that know more about sports and the statistics of sports teams that know any basic history of anything ever. It's,
of course,
right, and not the bad, because
it's un-American almost to be educated. And the thing is this: if we don't stand up, and again, just kind of bringing it back to Palestine, if we don't stand up to defend Palestinians, nobody will. In other words, I have so many friends who are activists. Their kids are activists. They're in jail. If they get killed tomorrow, any one of them gets shot and killed tomorrow, there'll be no consequences. We need to stand up and make sure that they don't get killed. We need to make sure that we are defending Palestinians, because there's nobody else to do it. Nobody else is doing it.
Let me ask you a question really quick as we start to get close to the end here. Is there a list of companies doing business with Israel that I can that people I could go to that I can say, hey, well, like for example, Sabra, that shitty hummus, at the grocery store, that's an Israeli deal.
Of course there is. If you go to the
Puma
BDS,
sponsors,
of course, the BDS movement website.
Okay,
go to the BDS movement website. The BDS, I forgot exactly, BDS.org, BDSmovement.org. Anyway, Google BDS movement. And there's a list of all the companies. There's a list of campaigns. There's all this stuff is there, and anybody can do it. Every single person can take a stance. Don't buy the damn sabra hummus. If that's all you want to do, that's fine. If you want to take it to the next level, go to the store manager, say, what the hell are you doing selling this?
What are you selling this shit for? Yeah.
When there's a boycott, for God's sake, there's a boycott, Right. And then, take it to the next level and start your own little chapter and invite your neighbors and do a book club. There's so many things that people can do on a small individual level that makes a big difference. And also make sure that Israel is not permitted to participate in cultural, academic, sporting, Any sort of event that the state of Israel is represented Israel should be boycotted. She should be not allowed to participate. And if they show up, they have to be met with protests.
Yeah,
we have to stand up.
Yeah, Adidas told the soccer team to go fuck themselves 5 years ago.
Yep.
And it was funny. And it's funny that Puma stepped in, because a lot of people don't know the rift, because Adi Dassler, who invented Adidas back in the 20s and 30s, his brother, his name was Paul, he started Puma in the 60s.
Oh,
they had a little falling out, right? They did really well in Germany, and they made some shoes for the Nazis. And then, true story. And then Paul Dassler said, screw this. And he started Puma in the early 60s. So there was always this rivalry, even though both brothers were dead, there's always this rivalry between the companies. So I thought it was really interesting that Adidas said, we're piecing out, screw you guys. And then the brother, who used to make shoes for the Nazis too, that company comes in and they support the Israelis, which I thought was just like this whole,
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And again, if it wasn't for pressure, I'm sure Adidas wouldn't have done the right thing, because 100% companies don't. But it's a good thing that they did, of course. And the next day, you saw Palestinians walking around with big Adidas, T-shirts with Adidas written all over them. But I mean, it's got to be that way. It has to be that way, and it has to be more than that. Israelis have to know they will not be able to compete. They will not be able to get on a plane. The Israeli officers, Israeli generals, if they land, anywhere around the world, they will be arrested for war crimes. That has to be the atmosphere, and it starts today. And it starts with people who run for, like I said earlier, for school board and city council. We have to make sure that they reject Zionism, and they have to do it in public, and they have to do it very clearly before they get elected, before they get our vote.
Yeah, no, that you're making sense. And honestly, shame on me. I didn't really even think about AIPAC going that deep into I didn't know that they went into city councils.
That's why they succeed.
Right.
School boards, city council. That's why they succeed, because they know in America, all politics is local. So that's where you got to start.
Good stuff, man. Well, hey, Miko, I appreciate the time, dude. As always,
anytime.
It's wildly enlightening when you come on, and I'm glad you're back safe. And
thanks.
Are you in LA now, or are you at?
No, I'm in DC.
You are in DC. Okay, cool.
I live in DC. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The Israeli Prime Minister is coming Thursday. I'm hoping to be out there to greet him with a middle finger sticking out.
Enough, Tally Bennett. What a prick. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like when Netanyahu left, oh yeah, get rid of that guy. For what? It's the same fucking guy.
The same guy.
The same fucking guy. And I've done this before. Like there was a I forget the name of the supermodel attorney general that they have over there, and she used to be a model. And when she was running for prime minister a few years back, they had this like Chanel type commercial for her.
Oh yeah, fascism.
Remember that? Yeah, fascism.
Yeah, fascism.
And then she's putting it behind each ear. It smells like democracy. I'm going, dude. This is open conversation there.
Fascism, yeah.
They think it's
she's the minister. She's the minister of justice.
That's what she was. Okay, yeah,
justice minister. She's a right-wing fascist.
Oh,
let me tell you. The worst, scariest kind.
Oh yeah.
She makes Margaret Thatcher look like like Heidi.
She makes Margaret Thatcher look like a nursery school teacher.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
All right, man. Well, hey guys, listen. My guest has been Miko Peled. I'm going to put some links in the body of the show. For his Patreon link and things like that. If you want to participate in his program, he runs an amazing program. He gets great guests to come on. You'll learn a lot by listening to his show. And as always, you can always visit thebittertruth.info. Help us out there if you care to. And if this stuff makes you uncomfortable, it's supposed to. Sleep tight.